Good afternoon. This is Shindo. Well, I haven't really discussed one of Donald Trump's main advisors, Steve Bannon. His official title is Assistant to the President and Chief Strategist. So you know, he's the one who used to have the website Breitbart. I think you're all familiar with that if you're on my channel. Well, I have said many times over the course of discussing Trump in general and politics in general, which is not something I've been doing but for about a year. But during the course of this, I have always said that it doesn't really matter whether or not you believe in these so-called end times. It doesn't matter what you believe. What matters is what they believe, these people who are in positions of authority. Now remember, folks, literally at the touch of a button now, we can destroy this planet. So it isn't as though someone saying the end is near, these are the end times. I'm not saying it 100 years ago, I'm saying it now. I'm saying it because these people who are in positions of authority to do these things are the ones who are making these end times come to pass. These end times, they are the catalyst for this. You've got Obama, and everything is swinging back to the right here. Back to Steve Bannon. Steve Bannon firmly believes in the apocalypse, as do so many people, it seems, that are promoting Trump, especially this religious right. They believe that these things need to happen, and they don't care who does it, because in their delusional mind, many of these people on the religious right, most of them, believe that they are going to be somehow raptured away from this earth. An absolute nonsensical idea that really didn't exist within the Christian church until the mid-19th century. And when you don't care about how bad this world gets, as these Christians don't, because they believe they're going to be out of here before it gets too bad. When you don't care, you're going to do some things that are going to cause all of us tremendous amount of pain and strife. Steve Bannon, who is a top advisor to Donald Trump, firmly believes in this apocalypse. As I've said, worry about what the people in charge believe. Don't worry about what you believe about this stuff, because you and I, we're not going to have any real control over this. Worry about the people who have the power, what they believe. This is from Huffington Post. Steve Bannon believes the apocalypse is coming and war is inevitable. You can, of course, find this in the description box, a link to this article. If you like what I do, please subscribe to my channel. Click like. I get a lot of thumbs down on any Trump video. Comment in the comment section and share my videos. Trump top advisor thinks we're in, quote, the great fourth turning in American history, unquote. Washington. In 2009, the historian David Kaiser, then a professor at the Naval War College in Newport, Rhode Island, got a call from a guy named Steve Bannon. Bannon wanted to interview Kaiser for a documentary he was making based on the work of the generational theorist William Strauss and Neil Howe. Kaiser Kaiser, an expert on, excuse me folks, pop-ups. Kaiser, an expert on Strauss and Howe, didn't know Bannon from Adam, but he agreed to participate. He went to Washington headquarters of the conservative active group Citizens United, where Bannon was then based, for a chat. Kaiser was impressed by how much Bannon knew about Strauss and Howe, who argued that American history operates on a four-stage cycle that moves from major crisis to awakening to major crisis. These crises are called, quote, fourth turnings, unquote. And Bannon believed the U.S. had entered one on September 18, 2008, when Hank Paulson and Ben Bernanke went to Capitol Hill to ask for a bailout of the international banking system. Quote, he knew the theory, Kaiser said. He obviously enjoyed interviewing me, unquote. Bannon pressed Kaiser on one point during the interview. Quote, he was talking about the wars of the fourth turnings, Kaiser recalled. You have the American Revolution. You have the Civil War. You have World War II. They're getting bigger and bigger. Clearly, he was anticipating that this fourth turning, there would be one at least as big. And he really made an effort, I remember, to get me to say that on the air, unquote. Kaiser didn't believe global war was preordained, so he demurred. The line of questioning didn't make it into the documentary, a polemical piece released in 2010 called Generation Zero. Bannon, who's now ensconced in the West Wing as President Donald Trump's closest advisor, has been portrayed as Trump's main ideas guy. But in interviews, speeches, and writings, and especially in his embrace of Strauss and Howe, he has made clear that he is first and foremost an apocalyptist. Folks, this stuff should be front page stuff that we're all talking about. I have to find this stuff. Everybody should know these things about the people who are now not only controlling the United States of America, but by controlling the United States of America, control the world. In Bannon's view, we are in the midst of an existential war, and everything is part of that conflict. Treaties must be torn up, enemies named, culture changed. Global conflagration, should it occur, would only prove the theory correct. For Bannon, the fourth turning has arrived. The great champion and messianic strong man figure may have already emerged. The apocalypse is now. But folks, if you're not quite catching on, the messianic figure here for this fourth turning is Donald Trump. You think it's such a stretch that these people are going to embrace him as the Messiah? You really think that's a stretch? Quote, we are witnessing, Bannon told the Washington Post last month, is the birth of a new political order, unquote. Strauss died in 2007, and Howe did not respond to requests for comment, but their books speak for themselves. The first, Generations, released in 1991, set forth the idea that history unfolds in repetitive, predictable four-part cycles, and that the U.S. was and still is going through the most recent cycle's tail end. In Generations, Strauss and Howe become perhaps the first writers to use the term millennials to describe the current cohort of young people. Strauss and Howe's theory is based on a series of generational archetypes: the artist, the prophets, the nomads, and the heroes. That sounds like they were pulled from some dystopian young adult fiction series. Each complete four-part cycle, or cyclum, takes about 80 to 100 years. In Strauss and Howe's reckoning, the fourth turning, which the authors published in 1997, focus on the final, apocalyptic part of the cycle. Strauss and Howe postulate that during this fourth turning crisis, an unexpected leader will emerge from an older generation to lead the nation and what they call the hero generation, in this case millennials, to a new order. This person is known as the Gray Champion. An election or another event, perhaps a war, will bring this person to power, and their regime will rule throughout the crisis. Quote, the winners will now have the power to pursue the more potent, less incrementalist agenda about which they had long dreamed and against which their adversaries had darkly warned, unquote. Strauss and Howe wrote in the fourth turning. Quote, this new regime will enthrone itself for the duration of the crisis, regardless of its ideology. That new leadership will assert public authority and demand private sacrifice. Where leaders had once been inclined to alleviate societal pressures, they will now aggravate them to command the nation's attention, unquote. Cyclical models of history are something academics kick around every now and then, said Sean Wilentz, an American history professor at Princeton University, but the idea has not caught on among historians or political actors. Quote, it's just a conceit. It's a fiction. It's all made up, Wilentz said about the cyclical historical models. Quote, there's nothing to them. They're just inventions, unquote. Michael Lind, a historian and co-founder of the New American Foundation, a liberal think tank, has called Strauss and Howe's work pseudoscience and said that, quote, predictions about the American future turn out to be as vague as those of fortune cookies, unquote. But Bannon bought it. Quote, this is the fourth great crisis in American history, Bannon told an audience at the Liberty Restoration Foundation conservative nonprofit in 2011. Quote, we had the Revolution. We had the Civil War. We had the Great Depression and World War II. This is the great fourth turning in American history, and we're going to be one thing on the other side, unquote. Major crisis, quote, happen in about 80 to 100-year cycles, Bannon told a conference put on by the Republican women's group Project Go Pink that same year, 2011. Quote, and somewhere over the next 10 to 20 years, we're going to come through this crisis, and we're either going to be the country that was bequeathed to us, or it's going to be something that's completely or totally different, unquote. Well, that's hedging your bets. It's either going to be back to what we had before, or it's going to be something different. Well, obviously, it's going to be one or the other. Quote, the Judeo-Christian West is collapsing, he went on. It's imploding, and it's imploding on our watch, and the blowback of that is going to be tremendous, unquote. That I agree with, absolutely. The Judeo-Christian West is collapsing. I agree. War is coming, Bannon has warned. In fact, it is already here. Quote, you have an expansionist Islam, and you have an expansionist China, he said during a 2016 radio appearance. They are motivated. They're arrogant. They're on the march. And they think that Judeo-Christian West is on the retreat, unquote. Quote, against radical Islam, we're in a 100-year war, quote unquote. He told Political Vindication Radio in 2011. Quote, we're going to war in the South China Sea in the next 10 years, aren't we? Unquote. Bannon asked during a 2016 interview with Reagan biographer Lee Edwards. Boy, does that make a lot more sense as to what the heck is going on with foreign policy with regards to China. This is me. I'm not reading. That makes a heck of a lot more sense, because I was just discussing this on the phone with a friend of mine just a few days ago. What the heck is Trump thinking when it comes to China? Well, if he thinks we're going to go to war with China, he might as well get us prepared for it. You know, you might think these things are inevitable. I do. I think they're inevitable, whether it's Trump in office or not. That doesn't mean that you take these reins and you do them yourself like these people do. That's playing God. That's playing God with the entire planet. Quote, "We are in outright war against jihadist Islamic fascism," he said in a speech to Vatican Conference in 2014. Quote, "And this war is, I think, metastasizing far quicker than governments can handle it," unquote. In a 2015 radio appearance, Bannon described how he ran Breitbart, the far-right news site he chaired at the time. "It's war," he said, quote, "It's war. Every day we put up America's at war. America's at war. We are at war," unquote. To confront this threat, Bannon argued the Judeo-Christian West must fight back, let loose as it did when Constantinople fell to the Ottomans in 1453. He called Islam a, quote, religion of submission. In 2016, a refutation of President George W. Bush post-9/11 description of Islam as a religion of peace. In 2007, Bannon wrote a draft movie treatment of a documentary depicting a, quote, fifth column of Muslim community groups, the media, Jewish organizations, and government agencies working to overthrow the government and impose Islamic law. Quote, "There's clearly a fifth column here in the United States," unquote, Bannon warned in July 2016. "There's a rot at the center of Judeo-Christian West," quote unquote, he said in November 2015. Quote, "Secularism has sapped the strength of Judeo-Christian West to defend its ideals," unquote, he argued at the Vatican Conference. The, quote, "aristocratic Washington class," unquote, and the media, he claimed, are in league with the entire religion of Islam and an expansionist China to undermine Judeo-Christian America. This sort of existential conflict is central to Strauss and Howe's prediction. There are 4 ways a fourth turning can end, they argued, and 3 of them involve some kind of massive collapse. America must be reborn, quote unquote. We'd wait another 80 to 100 years for a new cycle to culminate in a crisis again. The modern world, the era of Western history that Strauss and Howe believed began in the 15th century, might come to an end. We might, quote, spare modernity but mark the end of our nation. Or we might face, quote, the end of man in a global war leading to omnicidal Armageddon, quote, unquote. Now, a believer in these vague and unfounded predictions sits in the White House at the right hand of the president. Quote, "We're going to have some dark days before we see blue sky the morning again in America," quote unquote. Bannon warned in 2010, quote, "We're going to have to take some massive pain. Anybody who thinks we don't have to take pain is, I believe, fooling you," unquote. Quote, this movement, he said in November, is at the top of the first inning, unquote. What does Trump call himself? He keeps referring to himself as, "I'm just the messenger. I'm just the messenger." I have been trying to get through to people now for almost 6 years, as clearly as I can. Get yourself prepared. Do whatever you think is necessary for you to survive. I can assure you, those of you out there who are listening to me and who are not Christians, I'm not a Christian, you have every reason to be concerned about what's going on. It makes perfect sense that the man of sin, let's call him, would rise out through Christendom and use Christianity in order to consolidate his power. It makes perfect sense considering how many Christians there are in this world. And it makes perfect sense that they're going to justify it with their main enemy. The main enemy that they've had for hundreds of years now, and that's Muslims. But it will not end with Muslims. Now, right now, at this point, at this juncture in the United States, I would hate to be a Muslim. I really would. I would be terrified if I were a Muslim right now. It would make perfect sense for them to be. But the people who aren't quite waking up to this reality and need to are you liberals, especially liberal Christians, because they're going to come after you next. They're going to justify it by saying that you have basically infiltrated the church with your horrible things like the LGBT rights and anything that leans to the left politically is going to be considered apostasy. And apostasy is going to be considered against the law. Do you think I'm exaggerating? Just continue to sit back and pretend this isn't going on. Steve Bannon is the chief strategist in the White House. He sits in on all the meetings that concern any kind of foreign relations. This is something that should disturb you. If I haven't woken you up yet, I really wish that you could wake up from this stupor, this whole, oh, we're going to get rid of Trump. The left, we're going to get rid of Trump. He's going to do something against the Constitution. Trump is smart. He has appealed to the two forces that are going to keep him in power, and that's the police and the military. And they love him. They hated Obama. They love Trump. If he has the support of the military and the police, which he does, he can do whatever the hell he wants to, folks. The Constitution is a piece of paper. Wake up. This is Shindo. Have a good Wednesday.
By the fires of hell a-glowing, is the grisly reaper mowing?